The story begins on a frozen battlefield, where countless warriors have gathered for only one reason: to kill a single man named Road. Attacks rain down from every direction as the soldiers charge toward him without hesitation. To them, Road is no longer even considered human. They call him a monster and accuse him of using forbidden arts, believing that someone like him has no place in their world. However, Road does not face this massive army alone. Dark energy begins spreading across the battlefield as terrifying undead creatures appear behind him. Skeleton warriors, enormous monsters, and even a massive undead dragon gather under his command, forming an army large enough to confront the forces trying to kill him. And there is only one reason why the entire world fears Road this much. He is a necromancer, a man capable of controlling the dead and turning them into his own soldiers. Because of this forbidden power, everyone sees Road as an existence that must be destroyed. The warriors raise their weapons and charge toward him while shouting for his death, declaring that taboo magic like his should never be allowed to exist in their world. Seeing the massive army coming after him, Road remained completely calm. Since they hated his forbidden magic so much, he decided to show them exactly what that forbidden magic was capable of. Road immediately began preparing his most mysterious forbidden spell. An enormous pillar of energy erupted around him and shot high into the sky as terrifying power gathered across the battlefield. However, something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying his enemies, Road suddenly lost consciousness. When he slowly opened his eyes again, the battlefield, the soldiers, and even his massive undead army had completely disappeared. Instead, he found a familiar young maid named Leah standing beside his bed, repeatedly calling him young Master Road. At first, Road could not understand what was happening. Leah calmly told him that it was already time for breakfast, but Road barely paid attention to her. He looked around the familiar room before staring at his own reflection. He then reached toward the mirror and noticed that his body had become much younger. At that moment, Road finally understood the impossible situation he was in. He had somehow returned 20 years into the past. Road then began remembering everything that had happened to him. In his previous life, when he was 32 years old and already close to death, Road had somehow crossed over into another world. There, he became the world's only necromancer and mastered the forbidden arts of death. Over time, his strength reached an unimaginable level. He became the most powerful archmage that world had ever known and gained the ability to summon billions of undead creatures. The undead under Road's command were nearly unstoppable. His enormous legion could crush almost anything standing in its path. And eventually, there was almost no one left who could stand against him. His strength had even surpassed threats capable of endangering entire nations. Yet despite knowing how powerful he was, the people of that world still joined forces against him simply because they feared his forbidden power. They wanted to eliminate Road as if he were the greatest calamity in the world. Road had been ready to respond by unleashing a forbidden spell that even he had not completely mastered, but before he could see what the spell was truly capable of, something went wrong. Instead of destroying everyone who had come to kill him, the spell somehow sent Road 20 years back into his own past. The maid hurriedly reminded Road to get ready. She warned him that if he was late again, the Lord would punish him. Road calmly apologized to Leah and told her to go ahead, promising that he would join her soon. Leah was completely surprised by his behavior. She could hardly believe that Road had actually apologized to her, and what shocked her even more was that he had smiled at her. The Road she remembered had always been cold and cowardly, so his sudden change made her wonder if he was really the same young master she knew. After getting ready, Road walked through the familiar mansion and felt nostalgic. Everything around him brought back memories from 20 years ago. Road remembered his identity in this world. He was the youngest son of Baron Morris, the head of a fallen noble family living near the border of the Tatis kingdom. However, Road's reputation was terrible. Everyone considered him a spoiled and lazy young noble with no real future. Road also remembered the tragedy that had destroyed his family in his previous life. The Morris family had eventually fallen into ruin, and everyone close to him had died tragically. At that time, Road had been completely powerless. He could do nothing except watch as everything was taken away from him. But things were different now. Although returning to the past had caused Road to lose all the cultivation and powerful spells he had gained as a necromancer, his memories were still completely intact. He still remembered everything he had learned and experienced in his previous life. That alone gave Road hope. With a confident smile, he decided that he would use his knowledge to change everything with his own hands. This time, he would never allow the same tragedy to happen again. Soon, Rode arrived at the dining room, where his family was already having breakfast. His father, Baron Shiro Morris, immediately became angry when he saw Rode arriving late. Baron Shiro Morris harshly asked whether Rode was late because he was once again trying to find an excuse to skip his studies. Instead of arguing with him, Rode politely apologized. He assured his father that he had no intention of skipping his studies anymore. In fact, he promised that from that day onward, he would not miss a single lesson. His father's strict expression brought back even more memories for Rode. He had not seen that familiar stern face in many years. However, Rode suddenly began thinking about something much more important. His father had always been a strict and disciplined man who managed the Morris household carefully. Because of that, Rode could not understand how such a well-managed noble family had suddenly fallen into ruin in his previous life. Now that he had been given another chance, Rode was determined to discover the truth behind his family's downfall. While Rode was eating with his family, his elder brother, Leo Morris, scolded him for always being lazy. Leo told Rode that he could not continue wasting his time if he expected to inherit House Morris one day. However, their sister, Sif Morris, quickly defended Rode. She told Leo not to be so harsh on him, especially since Leo was the eldest brother. Sif then gently offered Rode some food and encouraged him to eat. Rode thanked his sister and quietly looked at her. Seeing Sif again filled him with warmth because she was still just as gentle and caring as he remembered. However, that happiness quickly disappeared when Rode remembered what had happened to Sif in his previous life. When the Morris family began falling apart, Sif had been forced into a political marriage with House Gorbei in an attempt to save their family. Unfortunately, House Gorbei had secretly joined forces with demons. They eventually sacrificed Sif to a demon, causing her to suffer a horrible death. Remembering her tragic fate made Rode furious. He silently promised himself that in this life he would never allow that tragedy to happen again. At that moment, Rode's mother, Lady Della Morris, entered the room. She immediately noticed Rode and coldly pointed out that he was late once again. Sif quickly tried to protect her younger brother. She explained that Rode had not meant to be late and claimed that it was her fault. She said she had been teaching Rode magic theory the previous night and they had simply lost track of time. But Lady Della immediately stopped her. She knew Sif was only making excuses to protect Rode and sternly ordered her to stop defending him. Lady Della then turned toward Rode and angrily told him that House Morris had no place for someone who spent his days doing nothing. Her patience with his lazy behavior had finally run out. She gave Rode a harsh condition. If he could not master magic within 1 week, he would be thrown out of the Morris family. Sif was shocked by her mother's demand. She argued that 1 week was far too short. Even Leo, who was considered a genius, had needed an entire month to fully master mana and become an apprentice archmage when he was Rode's age. However, Lady Della refused to change her decision. She reminded Sif that Leo had mastered mana at 9 years old and learned magic at 10. Rode, on the other hand, was already 12 years old and had still accomplished nothing. In her eyes, the Morris family had no need for someone who only wasted his time seeking pleasure. Lady Della then coldly questioned whether Sif wanted the Morris family name to be disgraced because of Rode as well. Sif was furious with her mother's harsh condition and could barely believe she was serious. However, before Sif could continue arguing, Rode calmly accepted the challenge. He agreed that 1 week would be enough. Hearing this, Sif immediately turned toward him in shock. She asked if he had lost his mind and whether he truly understood what he had just agreed to. Rode remained completely calm. Instead of backing down, he looked at his mother and asked what would happen if he actually managed to master magic within 1 week. Lady Della confidently replied that if Rode could truly accomplish it, she would grant him any request he made. Rode immediately accepted the deal. However, he already knew exactly what he wanted as his reward. He told his family that once he mastered magic within 1 week, he wanted permission to enter the hero's tomb. Rode's request immediately caught his father's attention. After thinking about it for a moment, his father agreed. He promised Rode that if he truly mastered magic within 1 week, he would personally allow him to enter the hero's tomb. Lady Della, however, thought Rode had completely lost his mind. She mocked him for believing that a lazy and useless person like him could ever be worthy of receiving the blessing of the fallen heroes. She was so certain that Road would fail that she told him to start packing his belongings and prepare to leave the Morris family. Afterward, Road left the room, but Sif quickly followed him outside. She was extremely worried about her younger brother and couldn't understand why he had accepted such an impossible condition. Sif told Road that if he had simply apologized to their mother, she might not have threatened to throw him out of the family. In her eyes, Road's usual lazy behavior had finally pushed their mother too far. More importantly, Sif couldn't understand how Road expected to master magic in only 1 week. Even their talented elder brother Leo had been unable to accomplish such a thing. Because of that, Sif was convinced that Road had accepted an impossible challenge and worried that he would really be forced to leave the Morris family. Sif was still worried about Road. She told him that she had secretly saved a good amount of money over the years. Even if Road was forced to leave the Morris family, she believed the money would be enough for him to live a comfortable life in the Tatis kingdom. After saying this, Sif suddenly told Road to wait there and hurried away to get the money for him. Watching his sister run off, Road could only smile helplessly. He wondered why she had so little faith in her own younger brother. However, Road understood why she felt that way. If he had not been reborn with the memories and experience of his previous life, even he would never have believed that he could accomplish something that even Leo had failed to do. But things were different now. Road had already decided to completely change his life, and this was the perfect time to begin. Road then started thinking about his plan. To master magic quickly, he needed to summon powerful undead creatures, and the hero's tomb was the best place for that. In his previous life, Road had accidentally discovered that a legendary figure was sleeping inside the hero's tomb. That was the real reason he wanted permission to enter it. However, he first needed enough strength to prove himself within 1 week. Since he could not enter the hero's tomb yet, Road decided to use a monster boss living in the forest behind the castle instead. Road soon entered the forest and searched through the area. Before long, he found exactly what he was looking for: the skeleton of an Earthrender Alpha. Before doing anything else, Road examined the condition of his current body. He quickly realized that the amount of mana inside it was extremely weak. His current mana level was barely at the Apprentice Archmage realm. Road understood that this weakness was the result of how lazy and careless he had been with his daily training before his rebirth. In this world, a person's class and strength were determined by the quality and quantity of mana inside their body. These levels were divided into 8 major realms: beginner, apprentice, intermediate, advanced, grandmaster, sage, saint, and legendary. The higher a person climbed through these realms, the more powerful they became. At the very top stood the legendary realm. Every legendary archmage was an extraordinary existence whose incredible achievements had left a permanent mark on history. Road knew that his current body was still incredibly weak compared to such powerful figures, but with all the knowledge and experience from his previous life, he already knew exactly how he could begin changing that. Road remembered just how powerful he had been before being reborn into this world. In his previous life, he was a necromancer whose strength had already gone far beyond the legendary realm. Ordinary levels had long since stopped meaning anything to him. There was only one title that truly described his former power: the strongest. Although the mana inside his current body was extremely weak, Road's identity and abilities as the undead monarch still remained. With his limited mana, he estimated that he could summon only 1 undead creature for now, but that was already enough for his plan. The Earthrender Alpha had only been a low-rank monster boss while it was alive. Its strength should have been around the beginner Archmage realm. Road believed that bringing such a monster back as his undead servant would already be more than enough to impress his mother and prove that he had changed. Standing before the monster's remains, Road released his mana. Powerful blue energy immediately surrounded his body as he prepared to use his necromancy. Road calmly stretched out his hand toward the skeleton and commanded his servant to awaken from its eternal sleep. He then ordered the creature to rise and bow before its master. A mysterious blue flame appeared and surged with power. At the same time, the ground around the skeleton began cracking violently. Huge pieces of earth shattered apart as an enormous skeletal creature slowly rose from beneath the ground. The monster finally broke free with tremendous force and released a terrifying roar. The creature was the Earth Splitter, a low-rank monster boss. Its enormous skeletal body towered over Road, covered with sharp horns, spikes, and massive claws. Despite its frightening appearance, Road remained completely calm as he stood before it. The enormous undead monster lowered itself before Road. Instead of attacking him, it immediately recognized Road as its master. With complete loyalty, the Earth Splitter bowed its head and respectfully addressed him as its lord. Road looked at the undead Earthrender he had just summoned and examined its abilities. It was still considered a low-rank monster boss, but after becoming undead, it retained several powerful skills, including Lava Charge, Roaring Inferno, and Seismic Eruption. Road decided to test one of those abilities. He activated Roaring Inferno, causing blue flames to gather around his hand. As a necromancer, Road could borrow and use the skills of his undead servants to a certain extent. Although the power of those borrowed skills would be greatly weakened when he used them himself, Road believed it was still more than enough to prove that he had successfully mastered magic. He then released the gathered energy. A powerful blast of blue flames shot from his hand and struck a nearby tree with tremendous force, blasting straight through its trunk. Seeing the result, even the Earthrender was amazed by its master's strength. Road, however, simply smiled and thought that the result was not bad. Still, Road understood the limits of his current body. With the small amount of mana he currently possessed, summoning and maintaining just one Earthrender was already the most he could afford. He then absorbed the remaining energy around him and realized that he still had a long way to go before recovering his former strength. Even so, Road wasn't worried. Having the Earthrender as his undead servant should already be enough to keep his strict mother from constantly pressuring him. Meanwhile, the story shifted to an ancient place known as the Hero's Tomb. This enormous tomb had existed long before the founding of the Tati's kingdom. According to legend, the Hero's Tomb was the final resting place of powerful human heroes from ancient times. Before their deaths, ancient sages had sealed the remaining powers of those heroes inside the tomb. Those powers had remained there for generations, patiently waiting for worthy descendants to appear and inherit them. It was said that whenever a talented young person caught the attention of one of the heroic souls inside the hero's tomb, that person would receive a special blessing. This blessing could place them on the path toward true power. Because of this, almost every young person in the Tati's kingdom dreamed of entering the hero's tomb and gaining the recognition of an ancient hero. Road remembered that his older brother, Leo, had once received such a blessing from the hero's tomb. Afterward, Leo joined the royal army and earned great achievements on the battlefield. Thinking about his outstanding older brother, Road finally understood why his mother was always so disappointed in him. However, Road had no intention of following the same path as everyone else. As a necromancer who practiced forbidden arts, receiving a blessing wasn't his true goal. What Road really wanted was something far more ambitious. He planned to enter the hero's tomb and subdue the powerful entity sleeping inside it. Sometime later, Road returned home. As soon as he arrived, his older sister spotted him and angrily called out his name. She immediately demanded to know where he had disappeared to, reminding him that she had specifically told him to wait for her. Before Road could properly answer, she grabbed and pulled his ear, making him complain that it hurt. His sister then warned him to keep a low profile for the next few days and stop doing things that would make their mother even angrier. She also told him not to worry about being exiled from the family because she would personally speak to their mother on his behalf. Road casually told her not to bother. His sister immediately became annoyed and asked what he meant by that. Road smiled and reassured her that he wasn't going to be kicked out of the family. He jokingly added that he couldn't bear the thought of leaving his dear sister behind. Hearing those words, his sister's anger disappeared for a moment. She quietly looked at Road, surprised by what he had said, and softly called his name. Just then, a maid hurried over and informed Road that his magic lesson was about to begin. Hearing this, Road immediately told the maid, Leah, to lead the way. Leah agreed and quickly guided him toward the classroom. Road's sister watched him leave with concern. She knew that even Leo had been unable to accomplish what Road was trying to do. In her eyes, simply talking confidently wouldn't make it possible. She began wondering if she should still beg their mother to show Road some mercy. Soon Road arrived at the magic classroom. However, instead of quietly entering, he was immediately greeted by mocking laughter from the other students. One young nobleman, the youngest son of Baron Anta, sarcastically welcomed Road, calling him useless and making fun of him for skipping class. He then mocked Road by asking if he had finally decided to start showing off. He even laughed about the rumor that Road was about to be kicked out of the Mortis family. The other students joined in and laughed loudly at Road. However, Rode didn't seem bothered by their insults. At that moment, the elderly magic teacher, Mr. Rigo, interrupted them and announced that the class had already begun. He ordered Rode to hurry back to his seat. As Rode walked toward his seat, memories of his previous life returned to him. Back then, these students had mocked him every single day because he couldn't control mana properly. Even though Rode had now been reborn, nothing about their behavior had changed. Instead of reacting angrily, Rode remained calm. He politely greeted Mr. Regu and apologized for arriving late. Mr. Regu was slightly surprised by Rode's polite behavior. He awkwardly greeted him back and told him to take his seat. In his mind, Mr. Regu wondered why Rode had suddenly greeted him and even apologized for being late. It was completely different from Rode's usual behavior. Rode quietly walked toward his seat. However, the young nobleman who had mocked him earlier looked at him with irritation. He scoffed and thought Rode was nothing more than a hypocrite. Once everyone settled down, Mr. Regu began the magic lesson. He explained that mana was a powerful and mysterious force, while magic was simply the many different ways people could control and use that power. He continued by explaining that once someone mastered mana, they could specialize in different classes depending on the spells and abilities they learned. There were many possible paths, including mage, healer, spellblade, shadow assassin, and many others. The moment a person successfully learned magic, they would become an apprentice archmage. After that, they could continue refining and purifying their mana to gradually increase their rank. A mage could advance step by step, starting from the beginner rank, then moving to the intermediate rank, and eventually reaching the extremely powerful saint rank archmage. As Mr. Regu finished explaining the different ranks, one of the female students suddenly raised her hand. Curious about an even higher level of power, she asked Mr. Regu about the legendary rank. Mr. Regu continued explaining the higher levels of magic. He told the students that those who reached the legendary rank were called legendary because they were like living myths. Each legendary mage became a symbol of their nation, and their great achievements were recorded in history. Reaching that level was the ultimate dream of almost every archmage. However, Mr. Regu explained that legendary archmages were now so rare that they practically existed only in legends. Even Grand Masters could be counted on one hand. Their own Tatis kingdom had not produced a single legendary archmage in the past 700 years. Because of this, Mr. Regu warned the students not to become too confident. He told them that mastering mana and learning magic were extremely important because those abilities would determine their position in the world. This was especially important for nobles like them. They needed to master mana before the age of 13, or they would already fall behind others from the very beginning. Just then, the youngest son of Baron Anta interrupted the lesson. With a mocking smile, he pointed out that there seemed to be one person in the room who still had not mastered mana. He then turned toward Rode and deliberately asked if he was right. Continuing to mock him, the boy reminded everyone that Rode had been attending magic lessons for 3 years and still had not managed to master mana. Rode remained calm despite the insult. He coldly told the boy that it was none of his concern. Then, with complete confidence, Rode declared that within 1 week, he would master mana and learn magic. As soon as Rode declared that he would master mana and learn magic within a week, the youngest son of Baron Anta burst into loud laughter. He called everyone's attention to Rode's words and mocked him for making such an unbelievable claim. The other students also began laughing and snickering at Rode. Even Mr. Regu was disappointed by Rode's bold statement. He had thought Rode had finally become more mature, but it seemed to him that Rode was still the same boastful young man as before. Rode ignored their laughter and remained calm. In truth, he could easily prove them wrong right now. However, he knew that suddenly mastering Roaring Inferno in just 1 day would attract far too much attention. Everyone would think there was something strange about him. Because of that, Rode decided not to reveal his abilities yet. It would be much safer to wait until the end of the week before showing everyone what he could really do. Later that night, Saif went to see her mother. When she entered her room, she respectfully called out to her. Her mother was calmly drinking tea when she noticed her. Seeing Saif visit her at such a late hour, she became curious and asked what had brought her there. Rode's sister stood nervously before their mother and begged her not to expel Rode from the family. She desperately wanted her mother to give him another chance. However, her mother immediately became angry. She could not understand why her daughter was begging for someone she considered useless. She declared that although House Morris had fallen from its former glory, they still had the pride of a noble family. She then compared Road with Leo. Leo had already mastered mana at the age of 9 and successfully learned magic when he was only 10 years old. Road, on the other hand, was already 12 and had still failed to achieve the same thing. Because of this, she considered him nothing more than a pleasure-seeking waste who had no place in the Morris family. Road's sister continued trying to convince her mother, but her mother refused to discuss the matter any further. She firmly ordered her daughter to forget about it and then walked away. Left behind, Road's sister could only watch her mother leave with a worried expression. She had tried to protect Road, but her mother had already made up her mind. She wondered what Road was going to do now. Finally, the 7th day arrived, and it was time for Road to prove the promise he had made. Because their families had requested it, Mr. Rigyu announced that he would personally test everyone's progress that day. Their relatives had also gathered to watch the test from the building. With everyone watching closely, Mr. Rigyu told the students to show him exactly how much they had improved. Meanwhile, Road's sister watched the test from a window with their mother. Their mother coldly questioned why she was even bothering to watch. She believed they already knew how this would end and was certain Road would only disgrace House Morris once again. However, Road's sister still refused to give up hope. She asked her mother what she would do if Road actually succeeded. As she looked down at Road in the courtyard, she quietly wondered whether he could truly pull it off. At the same time, one of the young nobles was extremely excited. He had been waiting all week for the chance to watch Road fail and embarrass himself. Confidently stepped forward and mocked Road, saying he would show him what real magic looked like. He announced that he planned to specialize as an elemental mage. He then gathered magical energy in his hand and immediately cast a fire blast. A blazing ball of fire shot forward at high speed and smashed into the target with a powerful explosion. The young man was extremely proud of his attack. After demonstrating his magic, he walked straight toward Road with a mocking smile. He called Road a loser and bragged that Road would never reach his level, even if he trained his entire life. He then challenged Road to show everyone what his so-called week of hard training had accomplished. Hearing his provocation, Road remained calm. Now that the other student had finished showing off, it was finally Road's turn. Road stepped forward, ready to demonstrate the results of his training. Suddenly, an overwhelming dark purple energy began swirling around him. The terrifying aura grew stronger as Road prepared to reveal the magic he had mastered in only 1 week. Road calmly stepped forward and raised his hand, preparing to cast his spell. However, the people watching immediately began laughing at him. Young Master Charlie mocked Road for pretending that he could actually use magic. He had heard that Road had not even mastered mana yet, so there was no way he could cast a proper spell. He was already imagining Road failing miserably and crying in front of everyone. Meanwhile, inside the building, the members of House Morris were also watching. An older woman asked Della whether she would truly expel Road from House Morris if he failed to cast magic that day. Della showed no sympathy. She coldly said that a lazy person like Road only brought shame to the Morris family name. In her opinion, Road would be better off leaving the family early and finding some other way to make a living. But while everyone was expecting Road to fail, Road remained completely focused. He gathered his mana and prepared his spell. Dark and powerful energy began appearing around him as he called Earthrender. Immediately afterward, Road unleashed Roaring Inferno. He decided to go all out with his own magic. He gathered a huge amount of blue energy around his body and launched his attack with full power. The noble who had been mocking Road suddenly froze in shock. His eyes widened as he stared at the incredible magic in front of him. He couldn't understand what he was seeing and wondered when Road had learned how to use magic. Road's powerful blue energy then surged forward like a massive wave and crashed directly into the stone slab used for the test. The impact was terrifying. The stone slab shattered under the overwhelming force of Road's magic, sending cracks, debris, and blue energy everywhere. Seeing the destroyed stone slab, everyone was left stunned. Road's sister stared at Road in complete shock. She covered her mouth and excitedly shouted his name, unable to believe what she had just witnessed. Road had actually succeeded. The other people watching were equally stunned. They looked at Road in disbelief and wondered if the person who had just displayed such powerful magic was really him. To them it seemed impossible. Even young Master Anta had been unable to destroy the stone slab, yet Road had completely shattered it with a single spell. An elderly man observing the test was also shocked by Road's power. He wondered when Road had become capable of doing something like this. In his experience, no apprentice archmage who had only recently learned to control mana should have been able to release such overwhelming force. Meanwhile, young Master Charlie, who had mocked Road earlier, stood frozen with a dark expression. He couldn't accept what had happened. Road's spell had clearly been stronger than his own, and he couldn't understand how someone he considered useless had suddenly become so powerful. Back inside the building, the older woman turned toward Della. After seeing Road's performance, she calmly remarked that the shameful lazybones Della had spoken about didn't seem so lazy after all. Road's sister became extremely excited. She happily called out to her mother and pointed toward the courtyard, proudly telling her that Road had done it. She was delighted that Road had successfully proven himself in front of everyone. After proving his strength, Road simply gave a small huff and calmly turned away. Road's sister, watching from the window, continued waving excitedly at him, clearly happy about his success. However, young Master Charlie could not accept what he had just seen. He angrily called out Road's name and demanded to know how someone like him could possibly use fire magic. Charlie immediately accused Road of cheating. He loudly reminded everyone that Road skipped classes almost every day and had never properly studied magic. Because of that, Charlie believed there was no possible way Road could suddenly cast such a powerful Roaring Inferno spell. His accusations quickly caused the surrounding students to start whispering among themselves. Many of them also began wondering how Road had suddenly become so powerful. Charlie continued mocking Road, saying he never expected him to use such a shameful method just to avoid being exiled. He then accused Road of stealing a magic tool from the family treasury and using it to cast the powerful fire spell. Hearing this accusation, Road finally turned toward Charlie and coldly asked what exactly he was trying to imply. Charlie explained that magic tools consumed a huge amount of mana. Considering Road's current mana reserves, Charlie believed Road would only be capable of using such a tool once. Confident in his reasoning, Charlie then turned toward Mr. Rigu and asked for his opinion. Mr. Rigu looked troubled. He apologized to Road but admitted that Charlie's reasoning made sense. Hearing this, the surrounding students became even more confused. They started wondering whether Road really had cheated by using a stolen magic tool. Road's sister, who had been happily supporting Road, also became worried. She wondered whether Road had truly stolen a magic tool. She began thinking that perhaps this was why Road had refused her help earlier and had instead chosen to handle everything by himself. Road's sister became increasingly worried about Road. If he really had stolen a magic tool, it would only disappoint their mother and father even more. Unable to simply stand by and watch, she decided that she had to do something to protect him. She quickly ran toward Road and the others. Reaching them, she asked Mr. Rigu not to blame Road. Road looked surprised when she suddenly appeared. However, before she could continue, she stepped forward and claimed that the magic tool Road had supposedly used actually belonged to her. But Road immediately grabbed her arm and stopped her from taking the blame for him. He calmly told her to let him handle the situation himself. Although she was worried, she could only watch as Road stepped forward. Road then faced Mr. Rigu and proposed a simple way to prove his innocence. He explained that if he could cast the exact same fire spell again, it should prove that he had not used any magic tool before. Mr. Rigu agreed with Road's reasoning. He explained that if Road could continuously cast the powerful fire spell, then it would clearly prove that he was using his own magic rather than relying on a magic tool. Road calmly accepted the challenge. He immediately gathered his mana, and an overwhelming blue energy began surrounding his entire body. The students watching nearby stared at him in shock, unable to believe how powerful his mana felt. Without hesitation, Road raised his hand and cast the spell again. A massive burst of blue fire shot forward and exploded with tremendous force, sending debris flying everywhere. Seeing Road successfully cast the spell a second time, Charlie was completely stunned. He could no longer deny the truth. Road really had not been using a magic tool. But Road was not finished yet. He raised his hand once again and quickly formed another powerful ball of blue fire. Before Charlie could even react, Road launched the spell directly toward him. Charlie froze in terror as the blazing attack rushed toward him. The powerful magic struck nearby with tremendous force, completely destroying the ground and creating a huge crater. The impact sent Charlie crashing to the ground. Sitting there in shock and fear, he finally realized just how overwhelming Road's true power was. The students around the courtyard were still struggling to believe what they had just witnessed. They wondered if the person standing before them was really Road, the same useless young master they had always looked down on. Meanwhile, Sif returned to her mother with a happy expression. After Road had proven his abilities, Sif asked her mother if she would finally stop talking about removing Road from House Morris. Her mother only gave a cold response. She agreed to leave Road alone for now, but warned that if he became lazy and useless again, House Morris would still have no place for him. Soon after, Mr. Regu officially announced his decision in front of everyone. After witnessing Road repeatedly use powerful magic, he declared that Road had not used any magic tool. With that, the accusations against Road were finally cleared. Later, Road returned home with Sif. There, Leo congratulated him on what he had accomplished. Road thanked him, slightly surprised that Leo had already heard about everything. Leo explained that Sif had been talking non-stop about what happened that day. He then invited Road to join them for a meal. During the meal, Road's father spoke to him. Mr. Regu had already told him everything Road had done at the academy. His father praised Road for his performance and told him that he had done well. He added that Road's actions had made the Morris family very proud. Road thanked his father for praising him. He then asked whether the promise his father had made earlier still stood. His father immediately confirmed that it did. He explained that the hero's tomb would open in 1 month, and he would secure a place for Road to enter. However, getting a place in the hero's tomb was extremely expensive, and the Morris family would have to pay a heavy price for it. Road's mother warned him that he had to obtain a powerful heroic blessing from the tomb to make the family's sacrifice worthwhile. She sternly told him not to disgrace the Morris family name. His father then added that since Road had now mastered magic, the family would give him the same treatment and resources as Leo and Sif. He hoped Road would continue training seriously and become even stronger. Road happily thanked his father and bowed respectfully. However, Road had a completely different goal in mind. He was pleased because he had finally secured a place inside the hero's tomb. Although heroic blessings were extremely powerful, Road had no interest in obtaining one. What he truly wanted was something far more valuable to him. From what Road remembered, there was an unmarked grave hidden somewhere inside the hero's tomb. Almost no one knew the story of the person buried there. That mysterious person had once been an incredibly powerful legendary spellblade from the primordial era. Road had already made his decision. Once he entered the hero's tomb, he planned to use his necromancy on that legendary warrior. He intended to make the powerful ancient spellblade his next summon. Although the legendary soul was close to disappearing, Road knew that it was still incredibly valuable. However, with his current amount of mana, he was not strong enough to summon such a powerful soul yet. Fortunately, Road remembered that his father had promised to give him the same treatment and resources as Leo. He realized this was the perfect opportunity to increase his strength before entering the hero's tomb. After that, Road spent an entire month training intensely. 1 month later, a maid entered his room and informed him that the Lord wanted to see him. Road immediately replied that he was on his way. He understood what this meant. The time had finally arrived. During that month of intense training, Road had successfully advanced from the early stage to the mid-stage of an apprentice archmage. With his increased strength and mana, he was now confident that he had enough power to summon the legendary soul he wanted. When Road met with his family, his father informed everyone that the hero's tomb would open that very day. Since Leo had already entered the hero's tomb before, his father ordered Leo to take Road there. He also told Leo to explain all the rules of the hero's tomb to Road along the way. Leo respectfully accepted his father's order and agreed to guide Road. Road and the others soon began their journey toward the hero's tomb in a horse-drawn carriage. While they were traveling, Leo decided to explain more about the tomb to Road. Leo first asked Road if he knew that the heroic blessings inside the hero's tomb were divided into different ranks. Road admitted that he did not know much about it and listened carefully. Leo explained that the blessings inside the tomb were divided into 5 tiers. Their ranks depended on several things, including how powerful the hero had been while alive, and how long they had been buried inside the tomb. The 5 blessing ranks, from lowest to highest, were white, blue, purple, gold, and red, with red being the rarest and most powerful. These heroic blessings could grant archmages additional abilities and greatly increase their strength. The rarer the blessing was, the stronger its effects would be. Some powerful blessings could even help an archmage begin walking the path toward becoming a Grandmaster Archmage. After hearing this, Road became curious and asked Leo what rank of blessing he had received. Leo calmly explained that he had not gained the favor of the heroic souls when he entered the tomb. Even so, he had still managed to obtain a purple blessing. Road was surprised when he heard this. He had not expected Leo to possess such a rare blessing. He finally understood why Leo had earned distinguished achievements so quickly after joining the royal army. His talent was clearly extraordinary. However, Leo remained humble and simply said that he was still too weak. Road's sister was also impressed and praised Leo. She explained that receiving any heroic blessing was already extremely difficult, while obtaining a purple blessing was almost impossible. She then warned Road not to underestimate the hero's tomb. His family might have secured him the opportunity to enter, but that did not guarantee he would receive anything. Road would still have to earn the recognition of a heroic soul and obtain a blessing by himself. Even the lowest ranked white blessing was considered rare. Road smiled awkwardly and told his sister that he understood, asking her not to put too much pressure on him. However, deep inside, he knew that he had not come to the hero's tomb simply to obtain an ordinary blessing. If his sister knew his true goal, she would probably become even more worried about him. Before long, their carriage arrived at the hero's tomb. The enormous entrance was guarded by towering armored statues, while countless graves and monuments could be seen deeper inside. Before Road entered, Leo gave him one final explanation. He told Road that he would have 3 hours inside the tomb, while Leo and Road's sister would remain outside and wait for him. Leo also reminded him that receiving the favor of a heroic soul depended entirely on his own performance. There was no guarantee that Road would receive a blessing simply because he had been allowed to enter. Road thanked Leo for the warning and prepared to enter the tomb. As Road walked through the massive entrance alone, his sister watched him from behind with a worried expression. She quietly hoped that Road would at least manage to obtain a white blessing. That alone would be enough to make her happy. Road continued deeper into the hero's tomb. Before long, he found himself surrounded by countless graves, statues, and monuments belonging to powerful heroes from the past. The entire place was covered in a mysterious and gloomy atmosphere. Looking at the enormous tomb before him, Road smiled with excitement. After everything he had done to prepare for this moment, he had finally made it this far. Before entering the hero's tomb, Road remembered Leo's advice. Leo had told him to search for the most beautifully decorated graves first because those tombs usually belonged to famous archimages and had a higher chance of granting rare blessings. However, Road had no intention of following that advice. He walked past the impressive graves and continued deeper into a quieter and more forgotten part of the tomb. Road knew that Leo's judgment was not wrong. Normally, searching the graves of famous archmages would indeed be the best choice, but Road possessed memories from his previous life, giving him knowledge that no one else had. Because of those memories, Road knew that beneath an ordinary nameless grave that had been forgotten for centuries rested an incredible legend. When Road finally reached the hidden grave, he respectfully apologized to the person buried there, saying that he meant no offense. Then Road closed his eyes and began gathering his mana. A mysterious blue energy slowly appeared around his body as he prepared to use his necromancy. Road called upon the ancient hero sleeping beneath the grave, ordering the legendary soul to rise from its eternal slumber and commanding it to awaken and bow before him. However, the ancient soul resisted Road's command, releasing a powerful surge of energy that shook the area around the grave. Road was not worried. Instead, he became annoyed that a mere remnant soul dared to resist him. Road declared that every undead creature in this world was his subject. After all, he was the strongest necromancer, the king of all dead. Under Road's overwhelming necromantic power, the soul was finally forced out of the grave. A massive undead warrior appeared before him, surrounded by bright blue flames and wearing heavy armor. It was a legendary Spellblade undead. Although its race was human, even Road could not immediately identify its mysterious skill. Road stared directly at the legendary undead. His eye glowed with blue energy as he gave it a simple command. He ordered the undead warrior to kneel before him. The legendary warrior could no longer resist Road's authority. Its enormous body slowly dropped to one knee before him. With its head lowered respectively, the legendary undead finally accepted Road as its master and greeted him as its lord. Road looked at the newly awakened undead warrior and asked if he could still remember his name. However, the undead warrior had already forgotten who he had once been. He respectfully told Road that he could no longer remember his name and asked his new lord to give him one. Road thought for a moment before deciding on a new name. From that moment onward, the legendary undead warrior would be known as Bone Crown Bladeseat. Meanwhile, outside the tomb, 3 members of House Ashblade also came to receive blessings from the tomb. While waiting, the older man spoke to his granddaughter Eleanor. He told her that since she was a member of House Ashblade, he believed she had a very good chance of gaining the favor of one of the heroic souls and receiving a blessing. He hoped that she would at least obtain a purple tier blessing. Leon also gave Eleanor some advice. He told her to focus on the large tombs once she entered. The people buried inside those grand tombs had all been extremely powerful figures during their time, so the blessings they could provide were usually much better. Eleanor understood the advice and immediately headed deeper into the graveyard to search for a powerful heroic soul. Before long, she noticed an impressive tomb with the statue of an armored warrior standing above it. She quickly realized that it belonged to the great hero Ills. She had heard that Ills had once reached the peak of the Grandmaster stage and was only one step away from becoming a true Archmage. Excited by the discovery, Eleanor rushed toward the tomb, believing that such a powerful hero could surely give her an excellent blessing. However, just as she approached the tomb, a powerful blue energy suddenly erupted from the ground in front of her. The unexpected force caught Eleanor by surprise and stopped her from moving forward. At the same moment, Leon sensed something dangerous. He immediately shouted at Eleanor to watch out because he could feel the aura of an undead nearby. Without hesitation, he drew his massive sword and rushed forward at high speed, preparing to protect Eleanor from whatever had appeared. Suddenly, Road, surrounded by blue flames, appeared from the tomb. However, when Leon looked closely, he was surprised to see that the person standing in front of him was only a young boy. Eleanor also noticed Road and assumed that he had probably come to the graveyard to receive a blessing, just like her. Still suspicious, Leon kept his sword ready and asked Road whether the powerful undead aura was coming from him. After observing him more carefully, Leon became even more shocked. He realized that the boy was only a beginner spellblade. Despite being a beginner, he was surrounded by an unusually powerful presence. Leon immediately understood that this child was far from ordinary. Suddenly, he sensed even more dark energy surrounding the tomb. Believing that the boy might have been possessed by a vengeful spirit, he quickly warned Eleanor to be careful. Golden energy began covering his sword as he prepared to attack and protect her. Hearing Leon's accusation, Road calmly turned toward the massive undead warrior standing behind him. He told Bladeseat that the man had just called him a vengeful spirit. Road then casually picked up a wooden stick from the ground and examined it. After checking its balance, he was satisfied and decided that it was good enough for what was about to happen. He handed the simple wooden stick to Bladeseat and told him to handle the situation. Bladeseat obediently accepted the stick and agreed to take care of it for his lord. As Leon charged toward him with his sword covered in powerful golden energy, he swung it with tremendous force. Bladeseat calmly raised the simple wooden stick and blocked the attack. The sword collided with the tiny stick with a loud clang, sending sparks flying everywhere. To Leon's shock, the wooden stick did not break. Instead, Bladeseat easily pushed his sword aside and knocked the weapon straight out of his hand. The sword flew through the air while the man stood frozen in disbelief. Seeing this, Leon became terrified. He could hardly understand how someone using nothing more than a small wooden stick had defeated him so easily. Eleanor was equally shocked by what she had just witnessed. She couldn't understand how such a thing was possible. Uncle Leon was a beginner spellblade, yet he had just been defeated by a young boy using only a twig. She looked toward Road again and realized that he appeared to be around the same age as her. This only made the situation even more unbelievable. As she stared at Road, she couldn't understand how someone around her age could possess such incredible power.